A very good morning to one and all present. So let's start today's lecture. Okay. So we had started with cyber attacks yesterday, and we are going to complete the remaining cyber attacks first. Then I will start with a topic which you have already seen in your previous subject, but it's really important. We need to go through it once again. What is threat and what is vulnerability? Then I will show a demo, quick demo of one of the vulnerabilities present today. And then, if time permits, we'll start with the third topic, that is authentication. Authentication methodology. It consists of all the techniques, for example, biometrics, till passwords, RFIDs, NFCs, etc. So we'll start with the very first topic, which is cyber attacks. We had seen few of the attacks yesterday, so let's resume. Example, we have already seen what is spoofing, what is session hijacking, man in the middle. Now let's start with the third type of attack. We are having total 10 attacks. So we are starting with this phishing and spear phishing. We have already seen phishing yesterday, how we actually perform phishing. We already saw the demo. But what exactly is phishing? Just have a look. Initially, phishing was intended only for emails. So the all the definitions on the internet you will see will mainly focus on emails. But as of now, there are many techniques by which we can carry out phishing. One of the techniques is called smishing. I will write it for you, otherwise it won't be visible. It's called smishing. That is phishing through SMS. Okay. Similarly, we are having wishing, VISING. Wishing is nothing but phishing through voice. That is when you might have received phone calls from so and so company that your Paytm KYC has expired. If you want to continue with your Paytm wallet, you need to complete the KYC. You will receive a link shortly. So basically, what they do is they are combining both wishing and smishing together. They are first of all calling you so that you are explained about the problem you are having, the fake kind of a problem which doesn't exist. So basically, they tell you the problem that so and so is your problem. Your KYC has expired. In order to continue your Paytm wallet, you need to update your KYC information. But what exactly happens is they will be sending an SMS link to you. You need to click on it. If you by chance click on that link, uh, you are actually exposing yourself to the phishing attack. What they can do is they can then ask for your credentials, your username, your password, etc. And if you do so, you will end up losing your Paytm wallet forever and your wallet account that is linked with that particular Paytm account forever. As a result, after a few seconds or few minutes, you will see some messages. So and so money has been deducted from your account. Thanks for conducting the transaction. So this is what happens. This is how phishing is done with the help of these two techniques, which is called as a smishing and wishing. Okay, so let's see the actual definition of phishing. Phishing attack is basically a practice of sending emails that I told you just now. It's basically concerned about sending emails. Initial definition is all about emails, but you can modify it according to the application you're using. So that appears to be from a trusted source. Basically, they may make the mail or they may make the SMS look in such a way that they created a fake Facebook website. So how to defend yourself against any such attack? Any answer? How to know whether you are accessing a phishing website or a genuine website? Very simple it is. Kindly let me know.
URL देख सकते हैं सर URL
URL, correct. That is the very basic thing which we actually forget sometimes. We don't pay attention to the URL for many times. For example, if the website is exactly looking like Facebook, we may not look at the URL directly. We as computer engineers will understand how to do it, but for many of the people who are not having proper knowledge, they may not look properly at the URL and they may overlook it. So basically, for example, if I write something like this, I will instantly have a look over here that this is something fishy because the URL is not like this. Correct. But someone who is not having a knowledge of exactly what URL Facebook has might overlook it. Okay. So basically, what is intended is the URL is hidden and sent in the mail so that the victim basically falls prey to that particular attack. Okay, so as a result, this phishing can be done primarily with the help of emails. Similarly, we also saw social engineering. For example, your Facebook account. Yeah, somebody clones your Facebook account. Clones as in somebody creates a fake profile with your name, with your photos. It has happened with many of us. In fact, few of my friends have fallen trap to it. Okay, basically, what happens? Someone sends you a request, friend request. You accept it, and that person gets access to your entire photos if you have not restricted your photos. Okay, if you have made your account public, then what happens? Anyone having access to your account can download your photos, and as a result they can create a fake account with your name, with your details, with your photos, whatever, because all of this information is available publicly on Facebook, right? If you have not hidden your profile information, then kindly do so, because otherwise anyone can track your activities, anyone can track your location. In fact, for example, we tag our photos, uh, we also let the other people know our location. Why? Because with each photo the geotag information is also available with Facebook. In fact, if you are aware, when you click some photo with your mobile phone or with your DSLR, whatever, if you go to properties, you might be able to see the location also. If you have kept your GPS on, then you will be able to track the location also. So what happens, if you upload those photos, your geotag information is also available inside the metadata of that photo. Metadata, you might be knowing, right? Basically data about data. So you will be learning in the subject DWM, or data warehouse and mining. Basically it's about data, it's data about data. So whatever happens, if you upload your image, the metadata also has the details regarding your location, your time, at which time you click the photo and all. So basically you are revealing your entire life, you are revealing your entire social life to the attacker. So as a result, the attacker can clone your Facebook page and send requests to your friends. This has happened with one of my friend. The request, they in fact request using the Facebook Messenger that so and so has happened in my family and I need urgent money. So if you're a close friend of that person, you may fall for that particular trap, and you may end up giving up some money to that person. But if it happens with you, one of my request, the basic request from my side is kindly ask or call your friend directly. किसी के ऐसे झांसे में फंसो मत. They may try to lure you, they may try to send some message that one of my friend has got infected with something with corona, for example, and I need money urgently, kindly help me. So people may try to make profit out of this pandemic situation. So stay well informed about all these. Call your friends in immediately if you encounter any such situation. Okay, otherwise you may fall for this particular trickery. Okay, so this is how phishing is done. Now what about spear phishing? Spear. Spear क्या होता है? What is spear?
भाला.
Okay, so basically spear is used to catch or attack a particular target. As you know, if we are planning to fish, normal terms में जा रहा हूँ मैं, fishing, FISHING. If I'm fishing, I will lay the trap, I will lure the fishes using some kind of what you say, fish food, and the fishes will get attracted to that net, and as a result, you will end up catching a lot of fishes. But try to correlate with a spear fishing. Spear fishing is nothing but you are trying to single out a particular target. You're not attacking a huge crowd. You are simply attacking a single target. What exactly happens is, if you are paying attention towards a particular target, you're tracking his or her activities for the last 1 month or last 2 months or so, you may find a target, you may find a pattern. This particular person goes to this particular location at so and so time. Office time is from 9 to 5, and then he catches the bus, train, whatever, reaches home by so and so timing. So what you can do is, you can then try to find out the patterns of his shopping. For example, he might be shopping a lot at some of the websites. For example, we usually post on Instagram, got this product, so and so, so and so. So as a result, if you are stalking that person, if the attacker is stalking that person, carry out a phishing attack. How? For example, if anyhow the attacker comes to know that I'm fond of watching movies, he might send me a fake message. He might send me a phishing message. For example, he may say that I have won 5 tickets to a movie. Okay, he will actually send me the movie tickets, and if I click on that link, accept the movie tickets, and somehow if I go to watch the movie with my family, what exactly is happening? He now knows that I live at so and so place. This is my address. He may actually carry out a physical loot. For example, he may actually loot my house. He may actually enter my house because now he knows that I'm not at my house, right? So he may carry out any malicious activity. He may enter my house with a few of his friends. He may actually carry out the theft, whatever. So basically, this I'm just trying to correlate your traditional crime with digital crime. With the help of digital crime, he can also carry out a traditional kind of a crime. That is what we call as spear phishing. Spear phishing is nothing but targeting a single person by constantly having a note of his or her activities throughout a particular time period and then carrying out the attack. So you need a lot of patience for carrying out spear phishing as compared to your normal regular phishing. Clear? So these are a few techniques using which we can reduce the chance of being phished. What are these techniques? Have a look. First is critical thinking. What is critical thinking? Obviously, if you are getting hundreds of mails per day, you might not bother about what exactly you are receiving from a company. For example, promotional messages. You may receive hundreds of promotional messages each day. By chance, if you have clicked on one of those messages, okay, that might be a phishing message, phishing email, and you end up giving your details. So you have to carefully pay attention on those mails, on the headers of those mails. Check the headers of that mail. For example, if I'm receiving a message from Amazon, obviously for example, if I'm receiving the message on my Gmail from Amazon, so the message has to go through the Google servers and then it has to reach me, right? So you can check whether that message has actually arrived from Amazon or not. We have already seen it in your previous subject CSS, but if you want to know, I will show you towards the end of the lecture how to check the message headers and verify whether it is actually coming from a location which is intended or not. Okay, I will show it to you how we can actually verify the email message. Okay, next up, before clicking on any suspicious link, simply hover above it. Simply move your mouse above it and you will come to know the URL of the actual website. This you might be knowing, right? So I'm just reiterating on the facts using which you can protect your system from those attacks. Similarly, analyze the email headers, check the reply to path and from path. Also, apart from this, one of the most crucial observations that I have done is the grammar. Basically, the mail which you have received might not be properly formatted. They may not be customized. For example, they may simply write "Dear user," "Dear participant," and they may not be having your name. For example, they may not address me with my name, "Dear Sridhar." They may simply call "Dear user," because they are simply sending n number of those messages to all the users all over the world. They don't know each and every user. Basically, if I'm an attacker, I'm trying out this particular combination. I'm trying out a fluke. I'm sending this message to hundreds of users. Even if 2 or 3 participants or 2 or 3 users click on that link, I will make a huge profit, right? Have you heard of this Coca-Cola attack? Coca-Cola lottery.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any example? What exactly happened in that? Any idea?
Sir, a group of people in Nigeria were sending messages regarding you have won a lottery from Coca-Cola and you have to deposit certain amount of money for that. And they take a
Correct.
huge amount of money from you in pieces.
Correct. Absolutely right. So basically, you may have heard about the Nigerian people. They are infamous for doing uh, these kind of attacks. So they have a group. They are located all over the world. They carry out these attacks. I'm not being racist. I'm simply saying what exactly has happened. So a group of those people are located all over the world. They carry out those attacks by sending out uh, multiple messages or emails to various recipients. They might have got the database of those users from various sources. So they usually send a message crafted in such a way that you have one so and so dollars, for example, 100 million dollars, and for getting that money, you need to deposit $10 or $50, for example, as a registration fee or a transaction fee. So the common mentality is, if I have $100 million or $1 million, I can easily spend $50 to get the money into my account, right? So what users fell for is, they actually paid that small amount of $10 or $50 to get that huge amount into their account. They were thinking that they will simply get the amount into their account if they deposit that $50 to the sender's account. But what exactly happened is, after sending those $50, they got another message that so and so transaction requires a certain amount of money more. So we need you to deposit $100 more or $50 more for carrying out the transaction. And people were actually fooled by this particular scenario. They actually ended up paying a lot of money, and as a result, this particular group of attackers ended up having millions of dollars in their account, because they had sent this particular trap to a lot of people all over the world, and as a result ended up having a lot of money into their account. Obviously they got caught, but it is really very difficult if you are using VPNs, virtual private networks, to hide yourself, or even Tor networks. But ultimately, after a lot of time, they eventually get caught. Okay, so I hope this is clear. I can move ahead. Next up is drive-by. What do you mean by drive-by attack? Any idea? So far, what we have seen is, we are sending out links to the victims, or sending out links to the prospect victims, who may end up clicking on those links and go to a website, then may end up leaving their private information or confidential information. But what exactly is this attack? Drive-by attack. Any idea? You can read it. It is basically an attack which drives the victim to a particular location the target wants. For example, if I'm visiting a website, I may not download anything, I may not click on any link. I am simply visiting the website. Even then, I am uh, exposing myself to the victim. How? Because if the website itself contains any malicious script, before the start of this lecture, Sagar had asked me if I want to send a payload using an APK, but the APK, if not installed properly on on the victim's machine, the malicious software may not work. What you can do is, you can upload your malicious script, if you're an attacker, on a website. What the attackers actually do is, they upload their malicious script onto a website, and they send links to that website only. So whenever the user or the victim accesses that website, the malicious script automatically gets downloaded onto the computer of the victim, and it will start its work randomly. Okay, that is what we call as drive-by attack. Similarly, if you are sending a link to the victim and ask them to download something, such kind of a modification to this attack is called as drive-by download. So these are the various names of this particular attack: drive-by attack or drive-by download. So any doubts till now? Kindly let me know if you're having any doubt, or I can go ahead. Okay, thank you. Next up is password attack that we have already seen. Password attacks are basically of two types. If I'm talking about cracking those passwords, they are of two types: brute force and dictionary. We already seen brute force yesterday. The only difference in the dictionary attack is, you're having a database with you, well-known passwords. For example, if I am writing my password, if I'm writing my password initially, I may start off with my name. That is the very basic, what you can say, very basic mistake that I can do. If I choose my password to be the same as my user ID, that is the most common mistake I will do. I will show you what are the various ways we should follow, what are the various techniques we should follow for creating a random password for creating a good password. Obviously, you might be having those passwords, but still, some of us might be having their password as admin123 or password 241, whatever, or they might be having their own name, or they might be having some other names. I'm not quoting those. You may understand very well what I'm trying to focus upon. Okay, so basically, those passwords are easily cracked. So what you can do is you should create a strong password, a combination of alphanumeric values as well as special characters using which you can secure your accounts. So basically, the password attacks are of two types. First of all is brute force. Second is dictionary. Apart from this, you can also carry out social engineering. You can carry out sniffing. Okay, let me tell you one of the techniques, which is called as shoulder surfing. Have you heard about it? Shoulder surfing. Let me know. Yes. No. Okay. Okay. Let me give you a very common example. If you are standing in queue in the ATM to withdraw money, basically it is always intended that only one person should enter the ATM room. But in our country, huge population, right? So people are so impatient that they end up going two or three people at a time in the ATM room. So what happens is, if I'm entering my ATM pin, if the person behind me just overlooks that password from above my shoulder, something like that, basically he is overlooking what I am typing. That is what we call as shoulder surfing. Similarly, if I'm entering a password on my computer system and one of my colleagues just looks whatever I'm typing and tries to replicate that later, this is what we call as shoulder surfing. Okay, so that is one of the techniques using which we can uh, get hold of the passwords. But that is a very lame kind of an attack, because you may not end up entering the exact password. You may not recollect the entire password word by word, letter by letter. It is one of the most trivial kind of a technique, but still it is what we can say, it is still valid at some places. For example, ATM passwords, ATM pins are just of 4 digits. You can remember them, right? I will also show you in the coming sessions what exactly are the sophisticated techniques of sniffing passwords. But that is when we will start the exact topic. Okay, so let's focus upon the next attack, which is SQL injection, the sixth one. These are all what you can say. These are all attacks which commonly happen in day-to-day life. You might have uh, been a victim of this kind of an attack also, SQL injection. Kindly let me know if you have actually performed this SQL injection attack. We have seen already in the last year also. I've already done practicals based on it. You have attended practical sessions based on it. Have you actually tried to perform this on a local machine? I'm not talking about real life. Don't ever try to do it on real websites. You will end up behind the bars for 5 years minimum with free food and free water. So don't even try to do that. Okay. On a local machine, it's fine. On your own website, it's okay, but not on your friend's website or any other public website. There are few websites available which actually allow you to carry out those attacks. Try to find out those websites or download any local website as we had done yesterday. In the demo today, I'm also going to show you a local website which I have created from obviously codes available all on the public domain. I will show you how to practice using those websites, but don't try this in real life. Okay. So basically, you know what exactly is SQL injection. You send out some maliciously crafted statements, SQL statements. For example, have a look over here. Select from users where account is so and so. So what exactly I'm doing over here? What exactly I'm trying to do? Any idea?
सर सारा डेटा हम लोग उस यूजर के अकाउंट का ले रहे हैं
Okay, कैसे
विदाउट
लेंगे?
इवन नोइंग कि वो लाइक अगर हम लोग ने यहाँ पे 1 रखा है तो लाइक वो ट्रू रहेगा तो वो हर सिचुएशन में लाइक
Correct.
अगर यूजर प्रेजेंट है तो उसका सारा डेटा ले लो फिर वो कोई भी हो वैसे
Correct. Correct. So basically, concept यही है कि have a look at this query first. Query यहाँ पे खत्म हो रहा है, right? So after that, whatever I'm typing is, it's always going to be true because I have added an or in between. Okay, so either this will be executed or this part will be executed. So if either of these gets executed, I will get the result, that is select star from users, where account is either this or this. So the second condition is always going to be true, because one will be always going to be equal to one. So as a result, it always evaluates to true, and the database will return the data for all the users instead of just a single user. Got it? So basically, this happens with all those websites which are very poorly designed, which are not having any sanitization properly applied. Those websites easily fall prey to such kind of an attack. In the older days, it actually used to happen, but now we have many techniques using which we can sanitize the inputs. What we can do is we can take this single quote and replace it by its Unicode character. So what exactly happens is the single quote or the double quote is replaced by the Unicode character, and once the server reads those characters, it simply again strips those Unicode characters and replaces that by the actual character. So as a result, what happens is the in-between attack is avoided with the help of those sanitization techniques. We have already seen it in detail in your last semester. I will share some links also where you can actually carry out these kind of attacks. Okay. Next up is cross-site scripting. Any idea what is cross-site scripting? You have done it, but how is it different from SQL injection? How is it different from SQL injection? Any idea? We have done it already. Kindly let me know. No one? Okay, let me check the messages. SQL directly affects the database. Okay, that's fine. But how is SQL injection different from cross-site scripting? Any idea?
The cross-site scripting redirects the user to the website where it can infect it.
Okay. And what about SQL injection?
It's used to steal data from the database.
Okay, correct. So if I'm having a single server, for example, I'm willing to attack a particular web server, the attack is directly carried out on that web server itself. But if I'm sitting somewhere, I'm sitting in India, the victim might be somewhere in Australia, and the actual malicious website or the malicious server might be somewhere in Afghanistan. So I can redirect the traffic with the help of cross-site scripting. Have a look at this diagram properly. It will make the things really easy. First is attacker discovers a website for having script injection vulnerabilities. First is this step. Okay. Next up, step number 2. The attacker injects a payload in the website's database. Sagar, this is your answer. The answer you were expecting. Kindly have a look over here. First step is attacker discovers a website for having a script injection vulnerabilities. Second, the attacker injects a payload in the website's database with malicious JavaScript that steals the cookies. Next up, step number 3. The website transmits the victim's browser the page with the attacker's payload. Have a look. Read this first 3 points carefully and let me know if you have got it completely so that I can move ahead. Any doubts till this point? First step, second step, third step, clear? First step is attacker discovers a website. Now, this is the most crucial step, in fact. First of all, you need to discover the website which may be vulnerable to cross-site scripting. You have to identify that website. And then in step number 2 is after identifying such a vulnerable website, you need to inject a payload into the website's database. What is a payload? The payload is nothing but the actual carrier of your malicious script. So anyhow, if you get access to that website server, you inject a payload into the website's database with the help of the unsanitized, or you can say weak vulnerabilities, with the help of the text boxes. The text boxes are the medium through which you can inject your malicious scripts into the website. Once those malicious scripts are passed onto the website, what you do is you basically transmit the victim's browser the page with the attacker's payload. That is, the payload is then transmitted to the website visitor. For example, I have injected a particular website xyz.com with a malicious payload. Whoever visits that website in step number 4, okay, has to obviously send a cookie to that website. Intentional or unintentional, the cookies are stored on the web server. So whenever any victim accesses that website, the cookies are stored on that web server, and finally that cookie value will be sent to the attacker. So this is the entire process. First step, I'm repeating once again: the attacker discovers a vulnerable website. Point number 2, the attacker injects the payload on that website using the text boxes, using JavaScripts. Point number 3 is then the website transmits the victim's browser the page. This is nothing but, for example, I'm sending that link to the victim. Step number 4 is the victim will visit that link, and whenever that link is visited by that victim, he or she will end up losing the cookie values. And you know what are the values present inside the cookies. The cookies consist of your session IDs, your password in rare cases. So basically the session ID is more than enough. If you have that session ID, you can use that ID to carry out any transaction on the victim's behalf. For example, if I'm the attacker, I anyhow get hold of your cookie value, I will end up having your session ID. Using that session ID, I can directly log into the website, claiming to be that person, and then carry out any transaction. For example, if this attack happens on an e-commerce website, you simply know how dangerous it could be. I can simply get hold of your cookie values and carry out a transaction on your behalf. So this is how cross-site scripting is that much dangerous. Clear? Any doubts so far? Can I move ahead? Okay. So next up is eavesdropping. We are coming towards the end of the cyber attacks, and then I will show you some demos. Eavesdropping attack. What is eavesdropping? Eavesdropping, सुना ही होगा सबने. सुनना, sniff करना. For example, if I'm talking about technical things, eavesdropping is nothing but coming in between a communication, similar to a man in the middle, but you're not an active part of that communication. You're simply listening what is being communicated from A to B. You can use Wireshark to tap the network. You can get all the information of the packets traveling from A to B, and then you can get hold of that information and use it later on at some point of time. That is what we call as eavesdropping attack. It again comes in two variations. First is passive, second is active. Whatever I discussed right now was passive eavesdropping. But if the attacker actively grabs the information from a friend, for example, social engineering, if I try to correlate the same example, I create your fake profile and ask for some money. That is nothing but an active eavesdropping, where you are trying to disguise as a friend and asking for some favors. That is what we call as eavesdropping. Clear? Next attack is birthday attack. Now, this has a unique name. Why birthday? You will come to know. First of all, read it once. Birthday attacks are made against hash algorithms. So now you know what is hash. Don't tell me you don't know hash. Huh? We've already done it previously. So kindly let me know what is hash and any of the techniques you know hashing. Any of the hashing techniques. Use the chat box MD5. Okay, MD5 or kuch. Not necessarily from your syllabus. You can type any hash function you know. MD5. Okay, most popular according to you. What else? We have already done one more. Yeah, SHA1 secure hash algorithm. SHA256 tiger hash. there are multiple hashes. SHA-1 is there, SHA-256 is there, MD5 is there, MD6 is there. So there are multiple hash algorithms available. What exactly is a hash? What is hash? For example, this is your algorithm MD5. If I enter any value over here, value I mean any input. It could be a text, for example, hello. Okay, I would get some random values. MD5, what is the bit size? Kindly let me know. MD5 hash value का size क्या होगा? What is the size of the hash value? Quickly, hurry up. I'm waiting for the answers. Then I will enter it over here. 128, correct. So 128 bits is the actual size of MD5 hash. Similarly, if I type something like this, will the hash be same? No. Why? Because we have already seen due to an effect. What is that effect called as? I have repeated n number of times in the class. Correct, Bhaumin. Avalanche effect. Avalanche effect is nothing but if I change even a single character from the plain text. For example, capital H is being replaced by a small h over here. It replaces or it changes the entire meaning of the hash. For example, the hash could be something like this. This is so and so, X, A, B, C, whatever. The hash which you receive for this will be totally different. It may start with A, C, Z, whatever, 1, 2, 3. It will be obviously of size 128 bits only, but the hash you will get after changing even a single character will be totally different from the hash which you may have got before. This is what we call as avalanche effect. Okay. So now tell me what you understood with this particular definition or this particular statement. What could be a birthday attack? Okay. In your class, do you have two people with the same birthday? It might happen, right? In your class, in this group, I'm having 100 people attending this particular session. You might be having people who are having birthdays on the same date, right? Okay. So let me give you a scenario. Suppose it's my birthday and I want only those people who are having the birthdays on the same day or the same date. For example, my birthday is on 30th August. For example, I may be allowing only those people who wish to attend my birthday party. They must be having birthdays on the same day. For example, you might be having a friend of yours who's having birthday on 7th June. That person could attend my party only if there is one more person who is having a birthday on 7th June. So anyhow, you have to find one more person from your class of 100 people who is having birthday on the same date. Then only you would be able to attend my birthday party. This is a very what you can say tricky kind of a condition I'm giving. I will only give treat to those people who are having birthdays on the same date. You got it? What I'm trying to say. Kindly let me know if it's going as a bouncer. Kindly let me know. Okay, you got it. So I will allow only those people from your class who are having birthdays on the same day. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to correlate this with your actual birthday attack. For example, no two messages will have same hash. Am I correct? Let me know. I'm repeating. No two messages can have the same hash. Kindly let me know if I'm right or wrong. I'm right. Okay. No two messages can have the same hash. Okay. Think upon it and then let me know quickly. Hash works with mod values, right? Yes, correct. So that is what I'm trying to ask. Can any two different messages have same hash? Yes, they can have same hashes. Let me explain. See, what I explained over here is if I'm having a single change in the character, the hash totally changes. Now I'm going the reverse way. What I'm trying to say is the remainder or the mod, basically hash works on mod functions. So two values can have the same mod, yes or no. For example, my message is something like this, hello world. Okay. And some other message, for example, I am smart. So these two messages might end up having the same hash value. They might end up. Okay. It is not a necessity that they will have the same hash, but they might end up having the same hash value. Okay. So what exactly I'm trying to say is, now read the message properly. The birthday attack refers to the probability of finding two random messages that generate the same message digest when processed by a hash function. Obviously the hash function has to remain same. So if I'm talking about message digest 5, and if by chance if I encounter two messages which give me the same hash value, then this gives rise to a situation where the system will not be able to distinguish which is the actual message and which is the spoofed message. Now I'm trying to portray it as an attack. For example, again go back to the same scenario, my birthday kind of scenario, where I'm allowing only two people to attend my birthday who are having the same birthdays on the same date, same birthday, right? So what exactly I'm trying to say is, if by chance a third person also joins that list, he also claims that he also has the same birthday. Now it creates a problem in front of me. How? Because I'm allowing only two people to attend my birthday for that same date. Now this third person also has the birthday on the same date, and he's also trying to attend my birthday party. So now how will I differentiate whether the third person is saying a lie or the first person is faking it? That creates a huge problem in front of me. That is what we call as birthday attack. Correct? So now let me try to correlate this. For example, in a network, if I allow only a computer with so and so IP address, that IP, okay, forget about IP address. If inside a network, I want to allow a message with a particular hash value to go ahead. But if anyhow the attacker tries to create a message which is also creating the same hash value, then what will happen? The server will not be able to differentiate between the actual message and the fake message. That we call as a birthday attack. You got this particular concept? It's really tricky somewhat. I've tried my best to make you understand using real life examples. So this is how we uh, end up having a problem called as the birthday attack. Clear? That's why it's called the birthday attack. Nowhere there's any mention of why it is called as birthday attack. So I gave an example of mine to make you understand what exactly could be this problem. Okay. So last up, we are having this topic which is called as malware attack. Now you know what is malware. I'm not going into detail of each of those malwares. I will simply talk about few variations. For example, macro viruses. You might have heard about macro. What is a macro virus? A macro virus is basically uh, a macro virus basically infects the Microsoft Word or Excel, which is having some macros. You might have heard about macros. Macros are basically used to carry out some certain tasks using automated code segments. So those automated code segments could be a medium of infecting the system using a virus. If I inject a particular virus or a code into that macro section, that may inject the entire computer system. Okay, if I click on that particular Word file or that Excel file, that macro virus gets initiated and that can infect my computer system. Clear? Similarly, boot sector virus. Boot sector virus or a boot record virus attaches itself to the master boot record or the MBR. Whenever you boot your machine, that virus gets activated. Okay, regardless of you deleting that virus, because you won't be able to delete that virus very easily. You have to go inside your boot sector and then delete that virus from the kernel. It is really difficult to identify. Antiviruses can't easily identify such kind of boot sector viruses easily. Okay. Next up is polymorphic. What do you mean by polymorphism? You might have heard this word in biology also, in your first year also.
A substance can acquire many forms with the same basic formula, sir.
Correct. Or you can say a mutation. It keeps on changing itself,
Yep.
keeping the same structure. So, for example, if antiviruses, you know how they work. They based upon some signatures. So, if a virus has a signature, and if it keeps on changing the signature of itself each and every time it injects a machine or it infects a machine, what happens is the antiviruses will not be able to distinguish which kind of virus is it, because it keeps on changing itself. The name of the virus may be same, for example, Win32, but actually the signature of that virus keeps on changing. So as a result, the antiviruses will not be able to distinguish properly which kind of virus it is, and it may not highlight that as a virus or an infected file. Clear? Next up, we are having stealth viruses. Stealth virus is nothing but those viruses who keep themselves hidden. They do so by compromising some malware detection software. Again, the same thing. They might hide themselves or conceal themselves behind some uninfected file, and the antiviruses may not be able to distinguish them. What exactly is this virus? So, if you want to test a particular virus, you might have heard about this website. Let me show you. Virus Totals. Have you heard about it? Virus Totals or Totals or Total.com, something like that. So you can visit this website. If you are not sure whether a particular file which you have downloaded from the internet is secure or not, whether it is safe to open it or not, what you can do is you can simply go to this website. Just check it once, Virus Total or virustotals.com. I'm having slight internet issues, although it's showing full, but my internet is not that strong today. So what you can do is you can go to this website and upload that file over there, and multiple virus engines will check, antivirus engines will check that file and give you a report whether this particular file is infected or not. You can try this and let me know in the next lecture whether this works out for you. You can try out with any of your files. For example, anything present on your desktop, simply drag it and paste it on that website and check it and let me know whether it shows any virus or antivirus alerts or not. Okay, so this website is really cool if you are not aware of the actual signatures of a file, because it actually has 70 or 80 antivirus engines working together on that file. So all of them will give their results and you will be able to distinguish whether it's a virus or not, whether it's safe to download, whether it's safe to open or not. Because you also know that if you download a particular file, unless you execute it, the virus will not get started. So before clicking or double clicking on that particular file, you can check whether that file consists of a virus or not using this website. Cool. So we are running out of time. In fact, I actually wanted to show you the demo. I'll try it in the next lecture, because for that I also need to give you the basic understanding of the topic. Okay, in the next lecture I will give you the demo. Let me complete this topic first. What is a Trojan? A Trojan you might be aware of. First, let me leave this link, otherwise it will be too late. Okay, kindly give your attendance in this particular link using this link. Okay, so let me go back to the topic, Trojan. What is a Trojan? A Trojan is a program that hides itself in a useful program. It's similar to a stealth virus, but Trojan actually behaves like some non-malicious or some non-harmful kind of a file. For example, calculator. I have given examples of this particular Trojan multiple times. For example, if I create a program called as a calculator and send it to one of my friends, they might not be suspicious about it. Okay. So whenever they click on it, an actual calculator will open up, but the Trojan will get affected. The Trojan will get activated, and it will start its work at the backend. It will try to copy files. It can try to delete files. Whatever is the logic for the Trojan, that logic gets activated whenever you click on that calculator.exe file. So whenever you download such files, before clicking that file, before executing that file, you can check whether it's a virus or not, whether it's a Trojan or not, using any of those websites I have mentioned. virustotals.com or whatever, you can use them to verify whether that file is safe to be used or not. Similarly, logic bombs. What are logic bombs? Any idea? The definition is given over here, but let me know if you know about it beforehand.
Sir, it means कि basically if a certain logic is developed, मतलब समझो अगर कोई date, मतलब अगर palindrome type of date बन जाता है, that is the logic. So in that case, it will just activate the virus on that day, और वैसा मतलब various logics होते हैं.
Okay, okay, chalega. Logic bomb basically, as explained very well, logic bombs are triggered whenever a certain logic is satisfied. For example, one of the variations of logic bomb is a time bomb. When you give the logic as a time, for example, at so and so 2 p.m. today, whenever it whenever the logic matches, for example, whenever it becomes 2 p.m. on 18th of June 2020, the logic will get activated. So that is what we call as a logic bomb. So if you inject such kind of a malicious software onto your victim, when certain logic is satisfied, then it will get activated. Clear? For example, if I upload a video on YouTube and schedule it at so and so time, at 2 p.m. my video will become live. That is what we do, right? So that is what I'm trying to correlate with a logic bomb. Clear? Whenever the time matches, that particular logic will get activated. Last up, we are having worms. Yeah. So what are worms? Worms differ from viruses. How? Answers, please. What are worms and how are they different from viruses?
सर वर्म्स हार्मफुल नहीं रहते, लेकिन वो मल्टीप्लाई होते जाते जब तक पूरा स्टोरेज फुल नहीं हो जाता.
करेक्ट. सो एज अ रिजल्ट वो भी हार्मफुल ही हुआ ना.
yes.
हाँ.
So basically does not inject anything to the system, वो खुद ही multiply होके storage full
So as
करता
a
है.
result आपका हार्डवेयर भी तो क्रैश होएगा. They look harmless. किसी को लगेगा नहीं कि वो हार्मफुल है, but they are harmful. Definitions ऐसे होंगे. Definitions might be there that they are not harmful, but in the end, they are causing you some kind of a trouble, right? Trouble as in your resources, your system resources get depleted. So as a result, you won't be able to do other tasks, correct? So they keep on replicating. They keep on replicating like zombies. So we can say that at the end, for example, if I keep on opening the notepad.exe file continuously, what will happen? After some point of time, my system RAM will get depleted, right? So as a result, my system will get really slow, and that particular resource I would not be able to allocate to some other task. So as a result, worms keep on replicating on their own. They don't need a particular vector. They don't need a medium. Once they get into a system, once they get activated, they keep on replicating themselves. And at the end, you need to shut down your machine. That is the only option. Or otherwise, you need to go to Task Manager. If you're able to find out that process and close it, kill it, then only you would be able to close that worm. Clear? Samjha sabko? So many more are left, but I will discuss only few of them. For example, we are running out of time. What is a ransomware? Ransomware, adware, spyware.
Sir, एक सॉफ्टवेयर होता है जो सिस्टम को एनक्रिप्ट कर देता है, and unless a specific amount is paid, it is not released or it is not freed out.
Correct. Ransom is nothing but kidnapping. After kidnapping, you ask for ransom, right? So if you anyhow inject your victim's machine with the help of any particular virus and you encrypt all the files present on that system with a key, private key, you all know what is cryptography, right? You all know what is cryptography. So what exactly happens is whenever you encrypt a file using private key cryptography, you need a private key to open it and recover the files. So what the attacker does is, if anyhow it gets access to a system, the attacker may encrypt all the files present on your system with a private key, and they may ask you for some money in exchange of that key. Even though that money, even though if you pay that money, it's not sure whether that particular person will release that key or not. So as a result, it's a win-win situation for the attacker. He gets the data on your computer and the money as well. And on top of that, they are dealing in bitcoins, or you can say any cryptocurrency, to keep their identity unknown to the world. This actually happened in the last 3 years, I guess, 3 years back. WannaCry ransomware 2 or 3 years back. That was the most uh, dangerous kind of a ransomware that actually shook the entire Europe. India tak pochte that became weak. Okay, so that is what I actually wanted to convey in this lecture. Okay, so I will share this document with you all by Saturday. All the 3 lectures data I will share on your Google Classroom. Kindly go through it. And then the next lecture we'll study basically what is vulnerability and threat, and then we'll see some demos followed by next topic, which is authentication. Okay, so we are running out of time, so kindly fill up the attendance and let me know so that we can end this session. Okay, so 97 are present today. Okay, thank you so much. If you are having any doubts, any questions, you can ask me, or you can quickly fill up the attendance and get ready for your next lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Most welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Most welcome. Push.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Sir,
Prakash.
Sagar is asking a question.
है क्या? किधर है? Okay, let me see.
Chats में.
In 7th one, cookies are stored at the device of the user, so how any attacker can interrupt in between with the help of cookies? See, Sagar, whenever you are communicating with with a website, cookies are not only stored at the browser end, but what exactly happens is whenever you are entering any information on the browser, on the website, you're also leaking out your session information. For example, if I log in into a website, what I am sharing with the website is my session ID. Okay, so it's not that cookie is stored on my on my browser or on my machine, so it is not public. The cookie in fact consists of a lot many things. One of that is the session variable. So if I log into a website, logging is nothing but a session is nothing but the time between login and logout. So intentionally or unintentionally, I am sharing the session ID with that particular website where I'm logging. So if I log in, I am sharing the session ID, and if the attacker gets hold of the session ID, he or she can use it to carry out the attack against me. So it's actually irrelevant whether the cookies are stored on the user's machine or on the server. The session ID is shared anyhow. I hope I could answer it. Okay, thank you so much.